It's funny. When you sit down at a diner, right, and you look at the table, there's like this assumed hierarchy of value just sitting right there in front of you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like you might have a relatively expensive, I don't know, brand of ketchup, or maybe a nicely engineered metal napkin dispenser.
Right. The shiny stuff.
Exactly. And then usually just shoved off to the side
Yeah.
in a cheap little glass shaker is what we basically consider the absolute lowest value item in the room, just little white rocks.
Yeah. You probably don't even think about them at all.
No, never. But today, we're taking a deep dive into the source material to uncover how those cheap little rocks were actually the engine that drove human civilization.
It's honestly the perfect topic for us to explore because it takes something entirely invisible in our modern daily lives, and just flips our understanding of history completely upside down.
It really does. We really want to get to the bottom of how something that cost pennies today was once, quite literally, traded for its weight in gold.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. And to do that, we are pulling from a massive stack of sources today, like a really impressive stack.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We have Mark Kurlansky's definitive book, Salt, A World History. We are also looking at some hard science, so research from the Harvard T.H. Chan School on sodium and health.
Which is fascinating stuff, by the way.
Yeah, totally. We also have Harold McGee's absolute classic on food and cooking. Plus, we're bringing in insights from the Journal of Food Preservation.
Gotta have the preservation science in there.
Yep, and we are capping it all off with the Encyclopedia Britannica's records on economic history.
It's a phenomenal collection of information. It really is. And, it all points to one undeniable truth.
Which is?
Well, today you and I just think of salt as a simple flavor enhancer, just something to make fries taste good.
Right.
But historically, it was the absolute center of the world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why salt was able to drive, like, entire global economies, we actually have to start by looking inward.
Yeah, we have to look at the human body.
Exactly. Our sources, particularly the research from the Harvard T.H. Chan School, make it crystal clear that sodium chloride, what we call salt, is not some optional luxury.
No.
It is a fundamental biological necessity. But I do have to ask.
Sure.
If it is a fundamental necessity, why are doctors constantly telling us to eat less of it today? I mean, it feels a bit contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah, I get that, but that is a very modern problem. It's born out of absolute abundance.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we process our food so heavily that we are basically drowning in sodium.
Right, it's in everything.
Exactly. But for almost all of human history, the exact opposite was true. Securing enough salt to simply keep your body functioning was a daily struggle.
Wow.
Biologically speaking, you literally cannot live without it. Your body cannot produce sodium or chloride on its own. You have to consume it.
And what exactly is it doing in there? Like, we always hear about electrolytes and sports drinks, but what does that actually mean for the average person?
What's fascinating here is the underlying chemistry. So when salt dissolves in your bodily fluids, it breaks down into sodium and chloride ions.
Okay.
And those ions carry an electrical charge.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, your nervous system uses those charged particles to conduct electricity. So when your brain sends a signal to your heart to beat or, to your lungs to breathe.
That signal travels along an electrical pathway.
Exactly. An electrical pathway made possible by sodium. Furthermore, water follows sodium.
Meaning what, exactly?
Your body uses salt to regulate its entire fluid balance. It keeps your blood pressure stable and ensures your cells don't just, shrivel up and die.
Okay, so if the human body is a biological machine, salt isn't the paint job or the fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror.
No, definitely not.
It is the literal conductive wire that lets the electrical signals actually reach the engine.
That's a great way to put it.
Without that wire, the whole machine just stops.
Precisely. You cannot opt out of needing salt. You can't just decide one year that, salt is out of fashion and you're going to switch to a different mineral.
Like a fad diet or something.
Right. It's non-negotiable.
But hold on, if it's that essential, why couldn't early humans just get it from the food they were already eating? I mean, animals have sodium in their bodies too, right?
They do, yeah. And early hunter-gatherers who ate a meat-heavy diet often got enough baseline sodium just from consuming animal flesh.
Okay, so when did it become a problem?
The moment human beings discovered agriculture.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When we shifted to a heavily plant-based diet, specifically grains and cereals, we created a massive sodium deficit.
Because plants don't have enough salt.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Plants simply do not contain enough sodium to sustain us.
Hmm.
So the dawn of farming created this absolute desperate biological need to find and consume pure salt.
Wow.
The demand was permanently locked at 100% across the entire human species. Everyone needed it.
So biology creates the desperation, but having a biological need for salt is one thing. Getting it is another. Because salt wasn't evenly distributed across the globe, right?
Nope, it wasn't.
So this biological desperation forced human beings to start getting incredibly creative with how they stored their food.
Which is crucial.
Right. Which brings us to the era before the refrigerator.
And the pre-refrigeration world is, it's a very difficult thing for us to wrap our modern minds around.
It really is.
We are so used to simply putting things in a cold box to stop them from decaying.
Yeah, but I have to challenge this whole idea that salt was the only reliable technology for that.
Okay, go ahead.
What about smoking meat? Or, I don't know, just drying it in the sun? Why did it have to be salt?
That is a great question. You can dry or smoke meat, sure, but those methods are incredibly weather dependent.
Right, if it rains, you're out of luck.
Exactly, and they often only treat the surface of the food. If the center of a thick cut of meat remains moist, bacteria will thrive in there.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, and the food will just rot from the inside out. This is where Harold McGee's on food and cooking and the Journal of Food Preservation really illuminate the science.
Because salt does something different.
Yes, salt does not just sit on the surface, it penetrates.
How exactly? What is the mechanism there?
It is all about a process called osmosis. Nature loves balance, right?
Right.
So when you pack a piece of meat or a fish in a heavy layer of salt, the salt literally draws the water out of the cells of the meat to balance the concentration.
Okay, that makes sense.
But more importantly, it draws the water out of the cells of any bacteria trying to live on that food.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it dehydrates the bacteria so completely that their cell walls actually collapse. They shrivel up and die.
Wow. So you weren't just flavoring the meat. You were literally creating a microscopic desert where decay physically cannot exist.
Exactly. You are chemically pausing the clock on decay.
That is wild.
And the why behind this is what changes history, because controlling the means of preservation meant controlling the ability to project power over time and space.
You know, it is so easy to overlook this. When we picture grand, ancient armies marching across continents, or explorers sailing wooden ships into the great unknown.
Right. We picture the glory.
Exactly. We picture swords and shields and billowing sails. We focus on the weapons.
Yep.
But if I am reading these sources right, none of those wars or discoveries could have literally happened without a mountain of salt, right?
None of them.
The meat would just rot in the ship's hull, and the armies would starve in the field. Salt was basically their fuel.
You are absolutely right. You cannot march an army of 50,000 men across Europe if you cannot feed them.
Right.
By heavily salting meat and fish, ancient civilizations could stockpile food to survive a massive famine.
Or a long winter.
Exactly. They could outlast a brutal freezing winter without starving. Salt was the literal infrastructure of survival.
So if gold was the ancient world's savings account, salt was its checking account.
Oh, I like that.
It was the currency you actually needed to survive Tuesday.
That is a perfect way to look at it. Whoever controlled the salt controlled the ability to move people and survive the seasons.
Right.
And when you have a biological mandate and a preservation superpower combined, but the resource itself is geographically restricted, to oceans and a few inland mines.
People have to move to get it.
Exactly. This biological desperation forces humans to start walking and building.
Which takes us right into how salt became the literal currency of empires.
Oh, yeah.
Our sources from Britannica and Kurlansky's history paint this astonishing picture of how salt shaped global trade networks.
It's incredible.
We are talking about massive, continent-spanning physical infrastructure built entirely around little white rocks.
The Roman Empire is perhaps the most famous example of this. The Romans built the Via Salaria.
Which translates directly to the Salt Road.
Yes, exactly.
They were paving highways for seasoning.
Well, because as we established, it wasn't just seasoning.
Right.
It was the lifeblood of their military projection. The Via Salaria was an immense, heavily guarded piece of infrastructure.
Like a modern supply chain.
Exactly. It was engineered specifically to transport salt from the coastal pans of the Adriatic Sea directly into the interior of the empire.
That is a massive undertaking.
It was. The Roman military apparatus was so entirely dependent on securing this resource that soldiers were sometimes partially paid in it.
And this is where we get the modern English word salary.
Yes.
That blows my mind every time I hear it. The word we use today for the money we earn at our high-tech jobs comes from the ancient Roman practice of handing a soldier a bag of salt.
It perfectly illustrates how fungible salt was as an asset.
Now, just to clarify for anyone listening, when you say fungible, you mean that a pound of salt in Rome was functionally exactly the same as a pound of salt in Gaul, right?
Yes.
It was a standardized currency.
Exactly. Unlike, say, a cow, which could be sick or old, or grain, which could be rotting, pure salt was always pure salt. It held its value so consistently that it could be used as a medium of exchange, exactly like standardized coinage today.
That is amazing.
But, you know, if you want to see the most extreme example of salt's value in trade, we have to look away from Rome.
Where to?
We have to look at the massive Saharan trade routes in Africa.
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the sources talk about inland African cities, specifically Timbuktu, and their relationship with salt.
Right.
Geographically, Timbuktu was incredibly isolated from any natural salt sources.
Yeah.
They didn't have ocean access, and they didn't have ancient dried seabeds to mine.
We were essentially salt-starved.
Right. But what they did have in massive alluvial deposits was gold.
Yes, the region was incredibly wealthy in gold, but because of their inland geography, they had absolutely no way to procure the salt they needed for basic biological survival.
Let alone food preservation.
Exactly.
So the traders would bring slabs of salt down across the harsh, grueling Saharan desert routes.
Which was incredibly dangerous, by the way.
I can imagine. And the people of Timbuktu would literally trade their gold for that salt.
Sometimes pound for pound.
Pound for pound.
Yeah.
Now, trading gold for salt sounds absolutely insane to us today.
It really does.
We hear that and think, oh, they were being scammed by the traders.
It sounds absurd to a modern ear, I know. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, what we're really looking at in Timbuktu is a historical masterclass in supply and demand.
How so?
The people of Timbuktu weren't being foolish. They were highly rational actors in a geographically constrained market.
It's like being lost in the desert with a suitcase full of diamonds.
Yes.
You'd gladly trade the entire suitcase of diamonds for a single bottle of water, right?
Absolutely.
Because value is entirely about context and scarcity.
Exactly. Gold might be pretty to look at, and it might represent wealth, but gold cannot preserve your fish for the dry season.
Good point.
And gold certainly cannot keep your nervous system firing. You cannot negotiate with your body's need for sodium chloride. When a resource has a fixed 100% biological demand, its value in a scarce environment is practically infinite.
It really highlights how arbitrary our modern concept of precious materials can be.
It does.
I mean, gold is precious today because it's shiny and rare, but salt was precious because it was the literal difference between life and death.
And that extreme value, born out of absolute unyielding necessity, inevitably catches the eye of those in power.
Right. Which brings us to the dark side of salt.
Yes, the taxes.
Because when a resource is an absolute biological necessity, when it is crucial for surviving the winter, and when it requires massive trade networks to acquire...
The governments are inevitably going to step in to take their cut.
Exactly.
And historically, they did so with devastating, brutal efficiency. Because the demand for salt was universal, taxing it was the ancient equivalent of printing money.
They had a captive audience.
The state knew you had to buy it, so they cornered the market.
The sources highlight the Middle Ages in Europe, where taxes on salt became absolutely crushing for the common people.
Particularly in France.
Right. Specifically, there was a French salt tax, known as the gabelle. Now, how did they actually tax it? Was it just like a heavy sales tax at the local market?
Oh, no. It was far more insidious than a simple sales tax.
Really?
Yeah, the gabelle is one of the most infamous and hated taxes in human history because of its mechanics.
What did it do?
The French government essentially monopolized the salt trade entirely. They stored the salt in massive, heavily guarded government warehouses.
Okay.
And then they mandated by law that citizens over a certain age had to purchase a fixed amount of salt every single year.
Wait, what?
directly from the government at incredibly inflated prices.
Wait. Imagine the government knocking on your door today, looking at the size of your family, and legally forcing you to buy 50 pounds of salt at a 1,000% markup,
Yeah.
whether you actually needed that much or not.
Yes, it was a guaranteed, inescapable revenue stream for the crown.
That is wild.
And the enforcement was brutal. If you couldn't afford your mandatory salt quota, or if you were caught buying smuggled, untaxed salt on the black market,
What would happen?
you could be sent to prison, sentenced to the galleys, or even executed.
Over salt.
Over salt.
So what does this all mean? We are talking about an ingredient that today, if we spill it on the kitchen counter, we just nonchalantly wipe it into the trash with a damp cloth.
Without a second thought.
But in 18th century France, people were literally driven to revolution over it because they couldn't afford to survive.
Yes. The Britannica sources explicitly cite the gabelle as one of the major contributing causes of the widespread social unrest that eventually exploded into the French Revolution.
That is just incredible.
To understand why a simple seasoning sparks such violent fury, we really have to synthesize what our sources call the 3 pillars of value.
Right. Let's lay those out clearly because this brings the whole picture together.
Okay, so pillar number 1. It was a biological necessity. Your heart and lungs need it to function. Pillar number 2. It had immense food preservation power through osmosis, meaning it was necessary to survive the winter without starving.
So check.
And pillar number 3, it had geographically limited access, meaning you couldn't just go find it easily yourself, you had to rely on trade networks.
Okay, so when the French state monopolized that access through the gabelle and drove the price up to impossible heights, they weren't just taxing a luxury good like wine or silk.
No, they were taxing life itself.
Wow.
They were taxing your very ability to keep your body functioning and your ability to keep your food from rotting.
Which leaves people with no choice.
Exactly. When a government monopolizes survival and prices the peasantry out of being able to live, revolution isn't just a possibility, it is an inevitable mathematical outcome.
It is no wonder the resentment grew so deep and so violent.
Not at all.
It is truly staggering to think about. A mineral that caused the Roman Empire to build massive, guarded highways across the known world.
Yep.
That caused wealthy African cities to eagerly trade away their gold.
And that caused starving populations in Europe to rise up and overthrow their kings, all for the little white rocks currently sitting next to your pepper shaker.
It really is an incredible journey.
It changes how you look at the dinner table, doesn't it?
It really does. Because today, thanks to the invention of the mechanical refrigerator, we no longer need salt to artificially pause the clock on decay.
Right, we just plug a cold box into the wall.
Exactly. And thanks to vast, modernized global trade networks and industrialized mining, geographic scarcity is mostly a thing of the past.
It's everywhere now.
Salt is ubiquitous, and it is incredibly cheap. But for thousands of years, a handful of salt was a literal fortune.
It is a profound reminder of how fragile and context-dependent our modern comforts really are.
Very true.
We assume the way things are today is the way they have always been, but technology completely rewrote the value of this fundamental resource.
Absolutely. So the next time you sit down at a diner or the next time you casually sprinkle salt on your dinner at home, take a second to really look at it.
Just observe it for a moment.
Realize that you are holding what was once one of history's most valuable treasures, a resource that built, sustained, and broke entire civilizations.
And this raises an important question, something for you to think about long after we finish our discussion today.
Ooh, I love these. Let's hear it.
If the ultimate value of salt came from those 3 pillars, biological necessity, life-sustaining preservation, and geographic scarcity, what is the salt of our modern world?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Levon.
Right. What is the ubiquitous, seemingly invisible resource today that our global economy, our survival, and our power